A struggling single mom asked a stranger for a ride, and never imagined he was a millionaire CEO with a broken heart. On a stormy evening, the wind howled through the empty streets, scattering broken branches across the rain-slicked pavement. The dim glow of streetlights flickered, casting eerie reflections on the puddles that had formed along the sidewalks. Inside a sleek black car, Daniel sat in the back seat, his gaze fixed on the window as raindrops raced down the glass. The day's meetings had been grueling, filled with tense negotiations and critical decisions to salvage his company. His shoulders ached with the weight of responsibility, and his mind was a whirlwind of unresolved issues. As the car turned onto a quieter street, the driver suddenly braked, causing Daniel to jolt forward slightly. "What is it?" he asked, his voice tinged with irritation. The driver pointed ahead. "There's someone in the road." Daniel leaned forward, peering through the windshield. A woman stood in the middle of the street, drenched from head to toe, clutching a small child to her chest. She looked desperate, her eyes wide with fear and determination, as she tried to shield her child from the relentless downpour. The driver rolled down his window slightly. "Ma'am, you need to move. This is dangerous." "Please," the woman pleaded, her voice trembling. "I just need a ride, just a few blocks. My baby is cold and we have nowhere to go." Daniel observed the scene silently, his eyes narrowing as he took in the woman's disheveled appearance and the child's shivering form. The driver hesitated, then shook his head. "I'm sorry, but we can't help you. It's not safe." The woman's shoulders sagged and she looked down at her child, her lips quivering. Just as she turned to walk away, the rear door of the car opened. "Get in," Daniel said, his tone firm but calm. The woman looked up, startled. "What?" "I said, get in," he repeated, gesturing to the seat beside him. She hesitated for a moment, then quickly climbed into the car, holding her child tightly. The driver glanced at Daniel in the rearview mirror, eyebrows raised, but said nothing as he resumed driving. Inside the car, the woman sat tensely, her clothes soaked and clinging to her skin. The child nestled against her, eyes closed, seeking warmth and comfort. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Daniel nodded slightly, his gaze returning to the window. "Where are you headed?" "Just anywhere safe," she replied. "I don't have a place right now." He glanced at her, noting the bruises on her arms and the fear in her eyes. "What's your name?" "Emily," she said, "and this is my son, Noah." Daniel extended his hand. "Daniel." She shook his hand tentatively, her grip weak but sincere. The car continued through the rain-soaked streets, the silence between them filled only by the sound of the storm outside. Daniel studied Emily out of the corner of his eye, noting the exhaustion etched into her features and the protective way she held her child. After a few minutes, he spoke again. "Do you have any family nearby?" She shook her head. "No, it's just us." He considered this, then made a decision. "You're coming with me." Emily looked at him, confusion and apprehension in her eyes. "What do you mean?" "I have a guest house on my property. It's safe and it's dry. You can stay there until you figure things out." Tears welled up in her eyes, and she nodded gratefully. "Thank you. I don't know what to say." "No need to say anything," he replied. "Just take care of your son." As the car pulled into the driveway of Daniel's estate, the gates opened silently, revealing a sprawling property surrounded by tall trees. The main house loomed ahead, its lights glowing warmly against the dark sky. The driver parked near the guest house, and Daniel stepped out, holding an umbrella over Emily and Noah as they exited the car. He led them inside, showing them the small but comfortable space. "There's food in the kitchen, and the bathroom is stocked with essentials," he said. "Make yourselves at home." Emily looked around, her eyes wide with wonder and disbelief. "This is more than I could have ever hoped for. Thank you." Daniel offered a small smile. "Get some rest. We'll talk more in the morning." As he turned to leave, Noah reached out and touched Daniel's hand. "Thank you, mister." Daniel looked down at the boy, a flicker of emotion crossing his face. "You're welcome, Noah." He stepped out into the rain, the door closing softly behind him. Inside, Emily held her son close, tears streaming down her face as she whispered, "Maybe things are finally looking up." Outside, Daniel stood for a moment, the rain soaking his clothes as he stared into the darkness. Something about Emily and Noah had stirred something deep within him, something he hadn't felt in a long time. He took a deep breath, then walked back to the main house, his mind racing with thoughts of the unexpected encounter that had just changed the course of his life. The storm passed some time before dawn, leaving a silver mist hovering over the estate grounds. The guest house windows glowed faintly in the early light, and inside warmth finally returned to Emily's trembling limbs. She had barely slept, her body curled protectively around Noah as he dozed beside her on the small sofa. Despite the fatigue, something in her spirit had eased. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, she was not afraid of what the next hour might bring. Later that morning, Daniel returned to check on them. He stood in the doorway of the guest house for a long moment, observing the modest scene, Emily now dressed in a borrowed sweater from the housekeeper, gently spoon-feeding Noah some cereal, while humming a lullaby so quietly it was almost inaudible. There was a stillness to her movements, a grace not of wealth, but of endurance. "Would you consider staying here for a while?" Daniel asked after a pause. Emily turned, startled. I don't want to impose. You need stability, a safe place, and the house needs someone to help around. Cleaning, cooking, managing some day-to-day things. I can offer you that." She looked at him uncertainly, torn between pride and desperation. "You'd trust a stranger in your home?" "I've let one into my car," he said dryly. "The rest is a small leap." She smiled faintly. "Then yes. Thank you. I'll work hard. I promise." And she did. Over the next several weeks, Emily settled into a rhythm. She woke early, helped the housekeeper with breakfast preparations, organized rooms, washed linens, and swept floors. Noah adjusted quickly, learning to play quietly in the garden, often under the watchful eye of Daniel's security team, who had been instructed to allow him free movement. Emily kept her distance from Daniel. She was respectful, quiet, never entering his office without knocking, never lingering longer than necessary. But Daniel noticed everything. The way she always folded napkins with perfect corners. The way she paused while vacuuming to pick up Noah's toys with a gentleness most people wouldn't bother with. The way she spoke to the houseplants as she watered them, as if they, too, needed reassurance. He found himself watching her more than he meant to. Once he saw her stand under the morning light filtering through the kitchen windows, eyes closed, just breathing. Another time, he saw her dance slowly in the hallway with Noah in her arms, swaying to music only they could hear. And then came the night he couldn't forget. It was nearly midnight. Daniel had been pacing in his study, unable to sleep, memories clawing at his chest as they did on particularly silent night. He decided to get some tea, anything to fill the silence. As he entered the kitchen, he stopped abruptly. Emily was there. The stove light cast a soft glow over the room. She was seated on the floor, back against a cabinet, her arm wrapped protectively around Noah, who was curled up on her lap beneath a thin blanket. She had fallen asleep sitting up, head tilted against the wall. Her free hand still cradled a half-folded cloth napkin. Daniel stepped forward quietly, crouching to pull the blanket higher over the child. He paused for a moment, his hand hovering just above the boy's cheek. Then his eyes shifted to Emily. Her hair had come loose, her lips parted in sleep, her expression peaceful but worn. There was something sacred about the image, mother and child, nestled in the warmth of a borrowed space, unaware of the man kneeling beside them. Daniel reached down, gently brushing the corner of the blanket, adjusting it to cover Noah's bare feet. His fingers brushed against Emily's hand. She stirred, eyes fluttering open. Their eyes met. I didn't mean to fall asleep here," she whispered, quickly sitting up. "He had a bad dream and I just—" "It's all right," Daniel said softly. He straightened up. "The kitchen's warm, it makes sense." Emily smiled faintly, brushing hair from her face. "I'll take him back." Daniel hesitated. "You can leave him here for now. Just make sure you rest too." As he turned to leave, he paused at the doorway and looked back. Her eyes were still on him, and in that quiet, flickering space between them, something shifted. Not spoken, not named, but deeply understood. Mornings came softer now. The once cold, sterile corridors of Daniel's grand estate had slowly been touched by a new rhythm, one marked by the scent of cinnamon in the air, the hum of lullabies coming from the garden, and the quiet clatter of dishes being washed by hand instead of machine. Emily had become a part of the house, not as a guest, not as a servant, but as something warmer, something the walls themselves seemed to lean toward. She moved with quiet purpose, sweeping the hallways, adjusting curtains to let in more light, planting herbs outside the kitchen window, and baking simple breads that filled the rooms with memories neither of them dared name. There was a new softness in the atmosphere, one Daniel noticed without understanding at first. It was the softness of life returning to a place that had been frozen in time. He began spending more time at home. At first it was unintentional. A late meeting canceled, a phone call taken from the library instead of the office. Then it became deliberate. He lingered at the breakfast table just a moment longer, walked past the kitchen when he didn't need to, paused in the hallway to listen to Noah giggling in the garden as Emily taught him how to press flowers between pages of an old book. He started noticing details he had ignored for years, the way Emily always hummed under her breath when she cooked, the way she tied her hair up differently depending on the task, loose when she baked, tight when she cleaned, in a braid when she gardened, the way Noah's laughter echoed in the marble halls like it belonged there, and every time she laughed, a real laugh, not one of forced politeness, Daniel felt a tug in his chest, like something once buried had shifted. They began speaking more. Not just about groceries or chores, but about books, old movies, childhood dreams. Emily shared stories of her teenage years in a small town, how she once wanted to become a florist, how she loved rainy days because they made the world feel smaller and safer. Daniel listened, really listened. He told her things too, carefully chosen, guarded truths, that he hated black tie galas, that his favorite time of day was just before sunrise, when everything felt suspended, that he didn't believe in fate, but he sometimes wondered if certain meetings were meant to happen. But he never spoke of his past, not the real one. One afternoon, while Emily was tending the rose bushes behind the house and Daniel watched from the study window, he caught sight of Noah sitting cross-legged nearby, coloring a picture in the dirt with a stick. Emily looked up at her son and smiled, brushing a curl from his forehead, and Daniel felt something ache inside him, something almost like longing. That evening, over a simple dinner she had made, a roast chicken with rosemary and garlic potatoes, they sat in the kitchen, just the two of them, after Noah had fallen asleep. "Everything all right at work?" she asked casually, pouring tea. Daniel nodded. "Same as always. Numbers, meetings, headlines." Emily smiled. "You make it sound so glamorous." "It's not." She leaned back in her chair, watching him. "You know," she said after a moment, "from the outside you look like someone who has it all." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "And what does that mean?" "I mean," she hesitated, choosing her words, "the house, the cars, the company. You have more than most people can dream of." He said nothing, waiting. "But sometimes," she continued, softer now, "you look lonelier than I've ever felt. And I've had some very lonely days." Daniel didn't blink. Emily held his gaze but didn't push further. Her voice had carried no accusation, only curiosity, maybe even concern. After a long pause, Daniel finally said, "Looks can be deceiving." Then he stood, his cup untouched. "I have to get back to some calls," he said, his voice unreadable. Emily didn't stop him. But that night, as he sat alone in his study, staring at the crackling fire, her words repeated in his mind. "You look lonelier than I've ever felt." And for the first time in a long time, Daniel wondered if it was written all over him, and if maybe, just maybe, someone like her could see past the mask he had worn for years. The late afternoon sun filtered softly through the tall windows of the study, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floor. A quiet calm filled the air, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves outside and the ticking of an antique clock on the wall. Emily had spent the better part of the morning dusting and organizing the room. Daniel's private office, usually off-limits, but left open today. She moved with care, wiping the shelves and straightening papers. Noah, as always, followed closely behind, carrying a toy car and babbling softly to himself. As Emily turned to adjust a framed photograph on the bookshelf, she didn't notice Noah reach up to the low cabinet where a small wooden object sat. It was a handcrafted model of a house, carved with precision, its roof slightly faded, its edges lovingly smoothed by time. To Noah, it looked like the perfect toy. "Look, Mommy," he said, holding it up with both hands. Emily turned, her heart leaping. "Noah, put that down." At that moment, the door to the study swung open and Daniel stepped inside. He froze. His eyes locked on the object in Noah's hands, and in an instant his entire expression changed. His jaw tightened, his voice came sharp, louder than Emily had ever heard it. "Don't touch that." Noah's smile vanished. His hands shook, and he dropped the model with a small gasp. The little boy's face crumpled as he ran into Emily's arms, sobbing. She wrapped herself around him instinctively, holding him close as she looked up at Daniel, her eyes wide with disbelief. "He didn't mean to," she said, her voice tight with emotion. "He's just a child." Daniel's breathing was uneven. For a long moment, he stood still, fists clenched, then turned and walked out of the room without another word. That evening, after Noah had cried himself to sleep, Emily hesitated outside the door of Daniel's study. Her hand hovered over the doorknob, unsure if she should knock. But something, guilt, concern, or the echo of the look she'd seen in his eyes, pushed her forward. She opened the door, slowly. Daniel didn't notice her at first. He sat on the edge of the leather armchair, the lights dimmed low. In his hands was the wooden house, now whole again. He ran his fingers along its roof, the way someone might trace the outline of a memory. Emily stood quietly by the doorway, watching. Finally, he spoke, his voice low, rough around the edges. "It was the last thing they gave me." She stepped closer, her footsteps barely audible. "My parents," he continued. "They had it made when I got accepted into college. Said it was a symbol. Build something lasting, Daniel, they told me." His lips pressed into a thin line. "They died 2 weeks later. Car crash. Drunk driver." Emily's breath caught in her throat. "I was supposed to have dinner with them that night," he said, voice quieter now. "But I canceled. I had a meeting. I thought there would be time." He looked down at the model, eyes glistening. There wasn't. Emily didn't say anything. Instead, she sat on the floor next to his chair, folding her legs underneath her. The silence between them wasn't heavy, it was honest, unmasked. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Daniel gave a small nod, the kind that acknowledged pain too deep for words. "I wasn't angry at him," he said after a moment. "Not really. I was scared that something so fragile could be broken again. And maybe that makes me weak, or just not ready." Emily reached out and rested her hand on his. "It makes you human," she said gently. He turned to look at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw a man no longer held together by pride or distance, but by memory and fear and a deep, aching need to hold on to something real. And in that moment, neither of them said anything more. They just sat together in the stillness, two people who had lost, who were slowly, silently learning what it meant to begin again. The days that followed that quiet night in the study moved with a kind of fragile grace. There were no confessions, no sweeping declarations, but the air between Daniel and Emily had changed. Their glances lingered a little longer, their silences held more meaning. Even Noah seemed to notice. He would grab Daniel's hand when they walked in the garden, or curl up on the couch between them during movie nights, like they'd been doing it for years. Daniel found himself smiling again, soft, involuntary smiles that crept in when Emily laughed, or when Noah proudly showed off a crayon drawing of their family. He didn't speak of the future. He didn't know how, but for the first time in years, he found peace in the present. Then came the knock at the gate. It was a Saturday afternoon. The house was quiet. Emily was in the kitchen baking banana bread with Noah while Daniel reviewed some files in his study. The intercom buzzed. The housekeeper answered, but her voice faltered. "Sir, there's a man asking for Miss Emily. Says he's family." Daniel frowned. "Did she say anyone was visiting?" "No, sir, but he's insistent." Daniel stepped to the security monitor. The screen flickered to reveal a man standing at the gate, unkempt, twitchy, with wild eyes and a clenched jaw. There was something immediately wrong about him. "I'll handle it," Daniel said. But by the time he reached the front door, the man was gone. That night, Emily was quiet. Her hands shook as she folded towels. She jumped when Daniel called her name. He asked what was wrong, but she brushed it off with a smile, too thin to be real. "It's nothing, just tired." He let it go. He should not have. The next morning, Daniel rose early, expecting to find Emily and Noah at breakfast. But the guest house was empty. Their things were gone. The kitchen was quiet. No note on the table. No sound of laughter in the hallway. Panic surged. He rushed back to the main house, calling the staff, searching every room. Then, on the front steps, tucked beneath a small flower pot, he found the letter. It was written in neat, hurried handwriting. "Daniel, thank you for everything. For the safety, the kindness, the hope you gave me when I had none. But my past has caught up, and I won't let it take away your peace. You gave me a home. I can't let that become a battleground. Please, don't look for me. Emily." His hands tightened around the paper. The words blurred as fury and fear rose like a storm in his chest. He crumpled the note, stormed back inside, and demanded answers. It was the housekeeper who finally spoke. "I didn't think it was my place, sir, but I saw a man outside the guest house yesterday. He was shouting at her. She told him to leave. He threatened her, said he'd take the boy. I was going to tell you, but I thought she had it under control." Daniel's jaw clenched. "He threatened to take Noah?" "Yes. He said, 'If you don't get the money, I'll take him. I'll make sure you never see him again.'" Something inside Daniel snapped. He paced the floor, breath heavy. "Get the security footage. Every camera, every angle. I want his face." His voice was cold, but beneath it was panic, unrelenting, suffocating. He had let them go. He had let them walk right back into danger. No, he would find them. He would bring them home. Not just because he cared, but because they were his. Even if he hadn't said the words yet, even if he hadn't let himself believe it, they were his. And no one, no past, no man, no monster, was going to take them from him. Rain hammered down on the small town, soaking the rusted tin roofs and turning narrow alleyways into muddy rivers. It was the kind of rain that blurred everything, lines on the road, reflections in the glass, even the edges of memory. But nothing could blur the moment Daniel saw her again. He had spent days searching, chasing rumors, reviewing camera footage, tracking cash withdrawals and bus routes, and finally, a tired gas station attendant in a dusty little town had muttered, "Yeah, there's a girl working at the diner down by the old train yard. Came in last week with a kid." Now, standing across the street from the shuttered building that had once been a warehouse, Daniel could see a flicker of movement behind the broken window. Inside, stacked crates formed a crude shelter. A thin mattress was spread on the floor. Emily was there, bent over a small heater, wrapped in a threadbare blanket. Noah was curled up beside her, fast asleep. Daniel stepped forward, his soaked shoes splashing through puddles. When she turned and saw him, her face went pale. She stood abruptly, her body tense. "Daniel?" He didn't move. Emily stepped outside, pulling the door shut behind her, standing beneath the skeletal remains of an awning that offered no real shelter. Rain pelted her shoulders, her clothes already clinging to her skin. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly, not meeting his eyes. "You shouldn't be here either." Her lip trembled. "I didn't know where else to go." "You should have come home." Emily shook her head. It's not your job to fix my life, Daniel. You gave us peace. I couldn't let my past destroy that. He stepped closer, the rain cascading from his hair, dripping from his chin. You think I care about peace more than I care about you? She opened her mouth to respond, but no sound came. I've lost people before, Emily, he said, voice breaking. I've stood by graves, held pieces of my life in my hands, and watched them disappear. I know what it's like to live with regret. Her eyes filled. I just wanted to protect you. I thought if I left quietly. You didn't protect me, he interrupted, taking another step forward. You shattered me. She turned away, as if she couldn't bear to look at him. I'm sorry. Then she ran. Her bare feet splashed through puddles, her body cutting through the rain like a ghost, vanishing into the alley behind the warehouse. Daniel didn't hesitate. He ran after her. The rain was relentless, blinding, but he caught her halfway down the block. He grabbed her wrist, not harshly, just enough to stop her, and spun her to face him. Emily, he gasped, out of breath. Stop running. She shook her head, sobbing now, her chest heaving. I don't know how. He pulled her into his arms. She resisted for a heartbeat, then collapsed into him, her fists clenching the back of his coat, her face buried in his chest. The storm roared around them, but all Daniel could hear was the sound of her breath, broken and desperate, and the beat of her heart against his own. I've already lost one family, he whispered, tears mixing with the rain on his cheeks. Don't make me lose another. Emily clung to him, sobbing harder now, every wall she'd built crumbling in the downpour. You're not alone anymore, he said softly, and you never will be again. They stood like that for a long time, soaked to the bone, surrounded by thunder and wind and memory. But in that moment, in that embrace, they were no longer running. They were found. The sun rose over the lake in a haze of gold and silver, the water glassy and still, reflecting the first light of day like a secret being slowly revealed. The storm had passed. Not just the rain, but everything that had kept their lives wrapped in fear and uncertainty. 2 weeks after Daniel found Emily, justice arrived. With the help of a private investigator and a sharp legal team, Daniel gathered everything they needed: surveillance footage from the estate's cameras, witness testimony from the housekeeper, threatening text messages traced back to Emily's ex. The evidence was overwhelming. Within days, the police issued a warrant. Emily's former husband was arrested without incident, and for the first time in years, she exhaled, without the weight of dread sitting on her chest. Freedom, real freedom, came not with celebration, but quiet relief. Emily and Noah returned to the estate. Only this time they did not enter through the guest house. Daniel welcomed them at the front steps of the main house. Noah ran to him without hesitation, and Emily followed, slower, her hand clutching the strap of her bag like it might all disappear if she let go. But it did not disappear. It only grew more real. Daniel had the east wing of the house redone. Fresh paint, soft rugs, a playroom designed for Noah with a window seat overlooking the garden. Emily's favorite flowers now lined the back patio. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon again. It wasn't just safety anymore. It was home. One afternoon, a few weeks later, Daniel asked Emily to take a walk with him. They strolled by the lake, hand in hand, Noah running ahead with a toy sailboat, skipping stones and laughing like he'd never known the weight of fear. The path curved around the water, leading to the same spot where Daniel had first opened up to her about his parents, where he had once sat alone, wishing for something more than silence. Now he stood at that very place again, only this time he wasn't alone. He turned to her. Emily smiled gently, her eyes searching his face. Why do I feel like you brought me here for more than just fresh air? Daniel didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Her breath caught. He opened it, revealing a simple gold ring with a delicate line of tiny diamonds. Nothing extravagant, just elegant, timeless, like her. I've had a lot of things in this life, Emily, he said quietly. Homes, power, wealth, but nothing has ever felt like mine until you and Noah walked through that storm and into my life. She said nothing, her hands covering her mouth, tears beginning to well in her eyes. "I don't just want to protect you," he continued. "I want to grow old with you. I want to build something that lasts, something my parents would have been proud of. I want to make a family, not out of obligation, but out of choice, out of love." He got down on one knee. "Emily," he whispered, "will you marry me?" Her tears spilled over. She nodded, overwhelmed, her voice thick with emotion. "I've never believed I deserved happiness. I thought love was something for other people. But you," she stepped closer, her fingers trembling as she touched his face, "you made me believe that maybe I'm worthy after all." He slipped the ring onto her finger. She laughed through her tears, and he stood, pulling her into a kiss as the sun glinted off the water behind them. Noah, oblivious to the significance of the moment, shouted from the lake's edge, "Did Mommy say yes?" Emily pulled back, laughing, and called, "I did!" Daniel wrapped an arm around her shoulders, and together they walked back along the lakeside, toward the home that no longer felt too big, or too quiet, or too empty. Because now it was full of life, full of family, full of love. The garden was quiet that afternoon, bathed in the soft golden warmth of the setting sun. Lanterns swayed gently from tree branches, their soft glow twinkling like captured starlight. Rows of wooden chairs stood between flower beds in full bloom, their petals bright and open, as if they too were here to witness something sacred. The wedding was small, just a handful of guests who mattered, close friends, a few staff members who had become like family, and the minister who had known Daniel since before the weight of the world settled on his shoulders. The ceremony wasn't about show, it was about presence, healing, hope. Emily stepped into the garden barefoot, her dress simple and flowing, the color of clouds before dawn. She had sewn part of it herself, delicate embroidery down the sleeves, a tiny heart stitched inside the hem where no one could see. It was the most beautiful thing Daniel had ever seen, not because of lace or cut or price tag, but because she wore it like she had finally become who she was always meant to be. Noah stood proudly in a miniature suit beside Daniel at the front of the aisle, his bow tie slightly crooked, his shoes a little dusty from playing earlier in the yard. But when he saw his mother, he straightened his shoulders and beamed. Music played softly, an instrumental version of a lullaby Emily used to hum in the kitchen. The guests stood. She walked slowly, steadily toward the two people who had become her entire world. Daniel reached for her hand when she arrived, his eyes full of everything he had never been able to say aloud. She smiled back, tears already slipping down her cheeks, and whispered, "Hi." "Hi," he replied, barely holding himself together. The vows were not traditional. They were written from nights spent awake, talking on the porch, sharing pieces of broken pasts, dreaming of unbroken futures. "I promise to be the safe place you never had," Daniel said, voice trembling, "to stand beside you when storms come, to celebrate every ordinary morning, to love you not because I must, but because I cannot help it." Emily took a breath, her voice clear. "I promise to never run again, to face things with you, not alone, to believe even when it's hard. You gave me back my voice, my dignity, my joy." Then came Noah's part. He stood on a little stool, clutching a card he had written himself, and read with practiced pride, "Mom used to cry in the dark, but now she laughs in the sunshine. Mr. Daniel makes her happy, and she makes him banana bread. So that's love, I think. I'm glad we're a team now." The guests chuckled through their tears. Daniel wiped at his eyes. Emily pulled Noah in for a kiss on the forehead. When they were pronounced husband and wife, there was no dramatic cheering, just soft claps, watery smiles, and the feeling that something deeply right had just unfolded before them. That evening, as the sun began its slow descent behind the tree line, the family of three sat together at a long wooden table under the open sky. Plates of roasted vegetables, fresh bread, and laughter passed between them. Candles flickered, flowers breathed in the night air. Noah rested his head on Emily's shoulder, sleep tugging at his eyelids. Daniel reached across the table and took her hand in his. They sat that way for a long time, just watching the sky change, soft purples, gentle oranges, a golden streak that seemed to stretch endlessly toward the horizon. No one spoke. They did not need to. They had been broken in different ways, lost in different storms. But they had found each other, one rainy night, one frightened question, one act of kindness at a time. And now, they were not perfect, but they were together, and for them, that was everything. As the sun set on their quiet garden wedding and 3 hearts beat together beneath the glow of lantern light, we are reminded that love does not always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it comes in the form of a stranger in a storm, a small act of kindness, or a promise made beneath the weight of memory. Emily, Daniel, and Noah showed us that family isn't defined by perfection, but by presence. That healing is possible, and that sometimes the people we were meant to find show up exactly when we've stopped believing anyone ever would. If this story touched your heart, reminded you of the power of compassion, and made you believe again in second chances, please consider subscribing to Soul-Stirring Stories. We bring you real, emotional, and inspiring tales that remind us all, no matter how dark the night, love always finds a way. Thank you for watching, and remember, some stories do not end. They begin, right where the tears fall.